Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jane Austen and Company. My name is Anne Ferdig, and I'm a doctoral candidate in English and Comparative Literature at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, as well as the co-director of Jane Austen and Company. Jane Austen and Company is a free public humanities series hosted by the Jane Austen Summer Program. And if you hang around till the end, we'll tell you more about JASP and how to get 10, as well as how to get involved in our exciting new creative writing workshop and contest. But tonight, we are so happy that you're all going to be able to join us for our third event in our 2021 series, Race and the Regency. Tonight, we are excited to welcome Professor Patricia Matthew. But before we begin, I'd like to hand things over to our colleague, Dr. Danielle Christmas, to introduce this series. Danielle?
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Christmas, and I'm an assistant professor of English and Comparative Literature at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I research and teach about the relationship between cultural production, like Jane Austen's novels, and their socioeconomic context, including the economic politics of slavery. It is this work that has allowed me to co-host this series, Race and the Regency, which will be running through May 2021. The speakers in this series will explore the role of race, nationalism, imperialism, and identity in the works and times of Jane Austen, as well as in literary and film adaptations of the time period. Perhaps you attended my talk on the Zong crisis in Mansfield Park, or Evie Zaboy's discussion of her young adult novel, Pride. If so, and you are back in anticipation of this entirely different and yet wholly connected scholarly presentation on abolitionism, gender, and economics, then you already understand the ethos of this series, to gather a diverse cross-section of intellectual and professional points of view and grow together in conceptualizing what race means for understanding the Regency and what Jane Austen's Regency means for our complicated notions of race. I know that I speak for all of us when I say how, based on your presence and enthusiastic curiosity thus far, we are thrilled by the prospects of what a series like Race and the Regency can achieve. So thank you for joining us and welcome back for this third event in Race and the Regency. I will now hand things over to Dr. Inga Brody, who will be introducing our author tonight.
Thank you, Danielle. And hello, everybody. I'm Inga Brody. I'm a co-founder and director of the Jane Austen Summer Program, which is the umbrella organization for the Jane Austen and Company and several other outreach programs. I'm an associate professor at UNC in the Department of English and Comparative Literature, and I'm also co-hosting this series. It's such a delight today to welcome Patricia Matthew, who's an associate professor of English at Montclair State University, where she teaches courses on the history of the novel, on British Romanticism, British abolitionist culture and literature in particular. Her work has been published in various journals and venues, including Women's Writing, 19th Century Gender Studies, and the Keats Shelley Journal, as well as the Atlantic and Lapham's Quarterly. She's also a specialist in diversity and inclusion in higher education and the editor of a very influential book called Written, Unwritten, Diversity and the Hidden Truths of Tenure from UNC Press 2016. And for this 2020 to 2021 school year, she's a distinguished visiting scholar at SUNY Buffalo's Center for Diversity Innovation. And judging by the over 600 people who wanted to register for this program, I think that we're all very excited to hear her. Then I also want to introduce Emily Sfera, who's the technical director for Jane Austen Company and registrar for the Jane Austen Summer Program. Very busy person who's helping us with tonight's program. Emily will be moderating the audience chat.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so happy to have you here with this important series. Now, I see that many of you have found the chat box. I'm so happy about that. If you want to make sure that all of your chats are going to everyone on the webinar, please make sure that your messages say to panelists and attendees. Now, if you would like to concentrate on what Tricia is saying and don't want to look at the chat, please use the little red dot in the corner to minimize the chat, and then you won't have to look at it. After Tricia gives her talk, we will open things up to a Q&A. When it comes to the Q&A section, please use the separate Q&A box. As I've said, as you can see, the chat gets to be a little lively. And so if you want your questions to be seen by our Q&A moderators, put them in the Q&A box. If you have any questions or Zoom issues throughout this program, please shoot me a message. You can put it in the chat box. You can put it to just panelists and I will see it and I'll be happy to do what I can to help. Thank you. I'll see you at the end.
Thank you, Emily. All right. Please note that tonight's program will be recorded. We will notify you all via our Facebook page and website when it is available to view. And without further ado, I would like to hand things over to Tricia.
Thank you all so much. I'm not going to look at how many people are here. It's a lot of people, especially at this point in the pandemic when I think that we're all zoomed out. Thank you so much for this invitation. This is my first time as part of the Jane Austen and Company community, but it's interesting to share this work with them because so much of my analysis of literature has been enriched by the faculty at the UNC's Department of English and Comparative Literature. So I am really glad to be here to share my work. I hope, Emily, is this in view mode? It's not in, everyone can see the full
Yes.
screen? Okay.
Just see this.
Great.
Can't see anything else.
Great. So I'm writing a book about gender, race, and Britain's abolitionist culture that points to the 1790 anti-sugar boycott as a key moment in how feminist politics rely on racialized hierarchies to maintain power. My book brings together 18th and 19th century literary texts, medical diaries, domestic objects, portraits, and contemporary film, sculpture, and portraiture to show how essential Black women and men as philanthropic objects have been to white women's political progress. The book moves between the late 18th and 21st centuries and among British abolitionist culture, accounts of West Indian plantation life, and contemporary Black arts. It revolves around sugar, as a commodity, a trope, a signifier of social mobility, and an object of protest. The substance that sweetened tea is central to two cultural moments that span time and geography: Britain's abolitionist movement and 20th and 21st century repurposing of its dominant tropes. My talk today is from an article that I'm preparing for publication in 18th century fiction and also revising for inclusion in the book. My book was prompted by an exhibit that includes the painting here on this first slide and a teapot I saw during an online search while I was preparing for a course lecture. The painting was part of Yale's 2014 exhibit, Slavery and Portraiture in 18th Century Atlantic Britain. The exhibit's curator describes it as follows. This young woman is dressed for a masquerade. Over her white dress is a Black domino or voluminous hooded cape. She holds a mask that bears the stereotyped features of a Black man or woman with conspicuously pink lips and cheeks. When the mask was pressed to her face and the hood was up, the woman's identity would be completely disguised. As a fashionable fancy dress entertainments, masquerades reached the height of their popularity in Britain in the 1770s and 80s. The painting here, quote, staged feminine whiteness through the juxtaposition of its perceived opposite. The teapot that started this whole project was used as artwork for a teacher-friendly website that had included an overview of the sugar boycott. And in trying to make sense of the teapot and what the exhibit suggests, I took a book chapter proposed in an entirely different project and expanded it to the book I'm writing now. There were things I already knew before I started the book, that there were Black figures in didactic fiction, that there were Black figures in poetry. I had read and written one of the first reviews of Linda Dominique's 2008 edition of the 1808 novel, The Woman of Color, A Tale. Equiano regularly showed up on my syllabi. But I wanted to know more about the teapot and the sugar boycotts. And so after a few years of reading and teaching and testing out ideas on my very patient students, I went to England in 2019 with this set of goals. I wanted to conduct archival research. Oh goodness. I'm sorry, I have this on automatic. I think I'll let this go. Sorry, folks. Yes. I wanted to conduct our archival research to read correspondence between abolitionists, meeting minutes of women's anti-slavery societies, abolitionist pamphlets, and other anti-slavery materials. I wanted to deepen my understanding of what race and portraiture can tell us about the progress of anti-slavery politics. I wanted to think about the history of commemorative porcelain in order to understand how anti-slavery teapots and objects circulated not only in Britain, but in France and the United States as well. So far, I'm just focusing on England and the United States. And I wanted to learn how local scholars and citizens were challenging the official narratives of Britain's involvement in the slave trade. In total, I visited 16 museums and galleries and conducted research in 3 university archives at Bristol, Manchester, and Birmingham. I met with citizen historians in Liverpool, Edinburgh, and Bristol, who either took me on walking tours or helped me find unofficial maps that marked sites connected to the slave trade in the cities you see here on the map. In 2020, just before the pandemic, I went to London to visit both Carol Walker's last exhibit, Fons Americanus, and to study the sugar objects that were housed on the London docks. So here's what we need to know to understand these. In 1791, William Fox attempted to dismantle the transatlantic slave trade by calling for a boycott of West Indian sugar. Fox, along with other abolitionists, called on women to participate in the boycott, and they did so in large part, they claimed, because of women's unique role in the home. If the public world was dominated by men, the domestic sphere was where women were expected to wield moral power, and it was also the sphere where they controlled what their families consumed. Beyond the home, their taste and sensibilities influenced the profitable ceramics market. My essay and book chapter focuses on how these 2 cultural mechanisms, domestic power and consumer sensibility, combine to increase white women's power in this chapter of Britain's abolitionist movement. The tea objects I focus on and reflect a unique moment in the history of objects and the role they played in shaping women's political power. They document the wide-reaching popularity of the abolitionist movement, offer proof that anti-slavery culture was not just popular, but profitable, and are evidence of 18th century women's cultural and economic influence. They also offer an important context for the cultural shifts and representations that lead up to Wedgwood's incredibly popular anti-slavery medallion. We should, I would argue, think about these objects within competing reports of the slave trade, in the context of the sugar boycott, and through Regency era didactic fiction by authors like Mariah Edgeworth, Amelia Opie, and Susan Ferrier. I'm working out the various implications of the hope that Wedgwood included in a letter to his friend and business partner, Thomas Bentley. He wrote in 1772, "I hope white hands will continue in fashion, and that Wedgwood, and that we may continue to make Black teapots." Sidney Mintz writes in Sweetness and Power that what we feel like, what we eat, and how we eat it, and how we feel about it are interrelated matters. Together, they speak eloquently to the question of how we perceive ourselves in relation to others. I wanted to take his sentiment here and think about how that applies to the objects that were developed in response to shifting attitudes, both about the slave trade and the way that women spent their time and money. At the time that Wedgwood develops, At the time that Wedgwood develops his anti-slavery medallion, there are competing narratives about what is actually happening in the slave trade, and he's part of all of it. There are commemorative bowls. That show ships in full sail that don't actually reveal what's occurring beneath the sails. This testimony from Mr. Norris in the 1780-90 Privy Council doesn't just lie and shade what's happening on these voyages. It presents that world in a way that would have been very appealing to women upper middle class women in the late 1800s. Before dinner, they are amused after the manner of their country. The song and dance are promoted. The men play and sing while the women and girls make fanciful ornaments with beads, which they are plentifully supplied with. This creamware bowl One of the things I've noticed as I was traveling across the country is how often things are attributed to Wedgwood and in archives without sort of connecting those moments to objects elsewhere in an exhibit that show that the same artist, the same businessman, and he was a powerful and very smart marketer who was advocating for the abolition of the slave trade, had also produced objects that celebrated its commerce. There's a shift that happens between the revelation of what happens on the slave ships and the medallion that made Wedgwood famous in thinking about the abolitionist movement. So here in the 1770s, we see a Wedgwood coffee pot. And what I'd like to draw your attention to is the way that the Black figure, who is on the left-hand side, if you're facing your screen, serving coffee. There's a way in which the landscape of that coffee pot is replicated in the teapot I'll show you in just a minute or so. So a couple is elegantly attired, sitting outside, they're sitting under a tree, and off to the corner is a Black figure, also elegantly attired and serving them their coffee or whatever it is that they would have consumed at that hour. This shifts as understanding about what was happening on the slave ships, those that you remember in the bowl just a second or so ago. As this pamphlet circulates, the slave ship Brooks, let me pause this and see if I can pause. The slave ship Brooks becomes an object that's designed to increase sympathy and to reveal the horror of the transatlantic slave trade. This is juxtaposed again against Equiano, describing the wretched situation of those who were captured. And all of this is happening even as Wedgwood is developing commemorative medallions that honor men, women, political events, historical moments. It's the use of jasperware, that clay that lends itself to dyeing that goes all the way through with figures cast in mold and then applied and then glazed. It takes like 6 days to make one object. It's that image and that idea that he connects to the notion and that he applies to Black basalt so that he can develop a teapot that will appeal. Basalt is not new when Wedgwood takes it over, but he makes it famous. And his goal is not just to make that Black basalt. And I want to be careful here and to suggest that he means literally that white hands will look wonderful and they will feel good holding Black teapots, but that we need to think about that figuratively as well as, literally as well as figuratively. When you visit the Wedgwood Museum, you have an opportunity to make your own jasperware, and the museum very carefully charts all of what Wedgwood has produced and his factory has produced over the centuries. Missing from the museum is the medallion. But I think if we think about the medallion and the basalt and the painting, and I'll show you what this object is in a moment. This is a patch box. There's an aesthetic that evolves around the idea of how white women are involved in and why they might be drawn to the abolitionist movement. It's really important to think about how representations of race in these objects does more work for women, from white women, than feminist critics have previously noted. There's a calculus at work here that the idea of one's whiteness as juxtaposed against Blackness is not just a visual reality, but a political and moral one as well. There's a critique that happens right around the time that Wedgwood starts developing this, what he calls creamware. And there's a national anxiety about commerce in general, and a suspicion that commerce lacking an inherent moral value needed a set of principles to regulate it. The sugar boycott then, and by extension, the way that anti-slavery objects were part of it, are an extension of that appealing regulatory exercise. The enslaved figure depicted on the medallion, asking, am I not a man and a brother, is translated and transferred to objects, any object that you might think of. There would have been medallions, there would have been brooches, teaware, hat pins, and patch boxes. The idea of the female consumer participating in a market upends the neat divide between the home and between the private and the public, between domestic spheres and political spaces. This pushes back against the idea that William Kendrick lays out in a 1754 conduct manual called The Whole Duty of Woman. He advised his female readers to leave aside political interest. Let the kingdom rule itself, he says. Let the wise men and counselors enact the laws and correct them. The policy of government, he explains, is a hidden thing, like a well of water in the bottom of a deep pit. He continues, thy kingdom is thine own house, and thy government the care of thy family. For Kenrick, the individual families he imagines women ruling are microcosms of the nation. A collection of well-regulated homes will result in an orderly, productive empire. His advice rests on the notion that the public sphere, here represented as the policy of government, is separate from the private sphere, thine own house, that the politics of each realm are discrete. This split is upended during England's national debate about the transatlantic slave trade, and it's done so deliberately. Women are called into the sugar boycott because of their moral power and because of their economic influence. By the time William Fox publishes his pamphlet, the rhetoric surrounding the boycott had parlayed women's domestic interests, buying ceramics, and authority over thine own house into political power. Publisher Benjamin Flower, for example, claimed the boycott would succeed only if domestic economy followed female compassion. He recommended Fox's pamphlet to women because they are formed to feel, they're more formed to feel than men, but warned them that their emotions would amount to little more than pretensions if they continued to, quote, sweeten their tea and the tea of their families and visitors with the blood of their fellow creatures. A local newspaper in 1792 explained that, quote, city meetings might make resolutions upon resolutions to little purpose unless we first gain control over our wives or daughters. Managing women's leisure, of course, was nothing new, and critiques about their vanity were a staple in 18th century culture. So the snark about their buying and Kendrick's advice are on one level standard fare, but their focus on women's consumer habits are particularly important to understanding what the abolitionist movement in the 1790 and these tea objects made possible for white women. I want to pause here and talk a little bit about the political aspect of how these objects are made. So Wedgwood uses a process called transfer printing, and the material that he uses is called creamware. It emerged as a popular way, I would say, in about the 20 years before my book starts, so maybe like 1770 or so. They're a popular way to circulate satirical and critical messages to broad audiences. It's called queenware as a reference to Queen Charlotte, and it, quote, crossed the social divide between earthenware and porcelain. It produced objects that were, quote, elegant and utilitarian at the same time. This combination of elegance and practicality melded with objects that could be both fashionable and moral at once. Wedgwood, who billed himself in advertisements as a potter to Her Majesty in the mid-1760s, understood the combination of fashion, aesthetics, and politics. And in teapots like these, his famous medallion not only reflected his complicated relationship to abolitionist politics, but his nuanced understanding of what women wanted. I want to pause here and make really clear that there's a complicated push and pull to keep in mind, that at the same time that women were being criticized for spending money on these objects, the objects were designed to appeal to their politics. Wedgwood made browsing as popular as shopping, and shopping into a communal activity with shops to visit. And so here we see the rise of pattern books that women would have thumbed through the way we used to thumb through catalogs. To go to a shop, you would travel to town to visit a Wedgwood shop. And even if you didn't buy anything, it became a place to see and be seen. And so shopping becomes a communal activity. Beth Kowalski-Wallace notes that, quote, China offered a blank textual surface upon which culture could write its notions of gender. At the same time, however, she continues, China inevitably reminds us of the fictile process through which gender is constructed. As a substance, porcelain carries no significance until it has been shaped or molded, painted and fired, affixed with a price. So too, women and men in the 18th century were subjected to a shaping process. Representations of race on these objects did a different kind of work. The writing of Black figures into philanthropic postures offered a moral sheen to an already existing habit, and Wedgwood is the person who waved it all through. When I talk about the anti-sugar movement and the debates as being an opportunity that served up a Black abolitionist object, I mean that quite literally. The verse, health to the sick, honor to the brave, success to the lover, and freedom to the slave, interestingly enough, is a play on the bowls that had on them success to, it might be success to the Dobson as a ship, it might be success to the name of the captain. Here, that is turned towards an abolitionist end. And so Wedgwood, always mindful of his consumer base, moves right along with them, in some instances anticipating them, and in some instances leading them. It's difficult to see in this shot here, but the figure, of course, of the black figure is erased from the teapot, but right around the finial, you can see that the landscape of the white couple sitting at a table outside in England has been replaced with a West Indian scene where there's a hut and a palm tree and a patch of ground. When I started on this trip, actually I was having lunch with some faculty at UNC. Someone asked me if these sugar bowls were filled and if these teapots were used. By the time I got to Kingston upon Hull, I'd been to 4 cities and I saw that teapot. Let me go back for a second. I saw this teapot in different places or some version of it. So these creamware pots, and the one in the back corner is one that I found particularly interesting. So these creamware teapots were clearly circulating. I've joked in other places that commemorative teapots and commemorative creamware was so ubiquitous that there would be one, like there might be one that said Jane Austen and Company, Trisha Matthew, March 16th, right? So they produce and commemorate, but they also offer moral instruction. I'm particularly interested in the teapot in the back that says, let your conversation be as becometh the gospel of Christ, because it replicates the same color scheme and same pattern as the teapot that I found elsewhere in the Birmingham Museum. I traveled to England to see this teapot. That was my goal. It took me a long time to find it. I remember writing to the Birmingham Museum and writing to the person who's in charge of their porcelain collection, telling her I was coming, that I particularly wanted to see this teapot. And when I arrived, she'd gone on vacation and no one could tell me where it was. I think it's interesting politically that this teapot is separate from the transatlantic slavery and abolition section of the Birmingham Museum, and separate again from all of the other creamware elsewhere in the museum. When I got to Hull is when I understood the vast expanse of how these objects were used and how these images and this aesthetic was deployed. I mean that abolitionism served up a particular kind of Blackness. I mean that quite literally. I don't have time to show you all of the permutations, but the sugar bowl, the sugar bowl that you see here in the lower, on the lower left-hand side of my screen was part of a larger set. You would have, there were serving bowls, soup tureens, plates, cups, and saucers. And so you would have had this sort of macabre performance wherein a middle class or upper middle class white woman was serving food out of abolitionist bowls that had inscribed on them things like a verse that says from Chronicles, "Deliver the captives again, which ye have taken captive." These objects went into the nursery on little bowls and cups for children. In part of my book, I talk about how the poetry, the anti-sugar poetry, is connected to the same objects that trained young British children to understand their place in the world as having to care for Black figures and Black individuals who were depicted repeatedly in this pose, kneeling with no agency, no individual power, no ability to strategize and work for their own freedom. These placards were circulated by women who collected signatures to for anti-slavery societies. And they resulted in a sugar bowl, and sugar bowls that were more plain, the East India sugar not made by slaves. I should note here that, again, with all of the layers and all of the different reasons behind the anti-sugar campaign and abolitionist politics, that some of the people who organized the anti-sugar campaign were stockholders in the East India Sugar Company. These things are never unconnected. Mariah Edgeworth, who herself was more of an ameliorist than an abolitionist. Her idea being, and we see this in her short story, The Grateful Negro, that the idea is not to dismantle the slave trade, but to maintain it with planters and overseers who would be more humane, has a pretty dry understanding, is pretty dry and sarcastic about what the anti-sugar boycott could actually do. More than affecting the trade directly, there's no research that suggests that the boycott put even a minor dent in the production of the West Indian sugar slave trade. The boycott and its material manifestations created an atmosphere that irritated slavery's apologists. And here's a quote: "In this neighborhood, we have anti-slavery clubs and anti-slavery needle parties and anti-slavery tea parties and anti-slavery in so many shapes and ways that even if your enemies do not in the end destroy you by assault, those who side with you must give up for the weariness of the subject." What I found particularly interesting as I've conducted research for the book is that there's a very quick shift as England moves closer to emancipation to translating the strategies of the anti-sugar boycott to anti-slavery projects around the world. And so the selling of the teapot was to raise money for other anti-slavery projects. And with that came a particular kind of political power. In other words, there's an export at the end of at the end of England, or official end. It doesn't obviously end in meaningful ways, but the legal end of slavery in England, there's an immediate pivot to make this a global exercise. And what gets exported is not just ideas, but aesthetics and economics, and always with the idea that white women are at the center of determining what is best for Black figures and Black individuals. I wanted to pause on this lovely configuration, this horse made of porcelain, because I think it would be very easy to draw a really stark line that suggests that to participate in any way means that you are ignoring or forgetting what's underneath the horror of the sugar that people put in their teas and the Regency culture that we tend to celebrate in certain ways. I wanted to put this here to show how very seductive it was. I was on a research trip to write a book that critiques contemporary feminism, that looks at the violent underpinnings of the habits and performances and the culture that we kind of embrace. And I was also completely enthralled by what I saw at the Wedgwood Museum. There's a tea house there. I had an amazing scone and a cup of tea. I found myself taking pictures of Wedgwood patterns and sending them to my friends and saying, if I could afford this, you know, these are the 4 I would get to you. There's a very seductive and complicated relationship between consumerism and politics. And I wouldn't want to give anyone the idea that this is something that we can avoid or something that we can just brush off, or in the words of our contemporary discourse, quote unquote, cancel. What we need to do is think about it, engage with it, especially since it hasn't gone anywhere. I know that you're going to hear a talk about Bridgerton later, but I can tell you this, that Wedgwood and the tea boycotts and the sugar boycotts are underneath Shonda Rhimes' very popular show that's going into its 2nd season. We see here Queen Charlotte, and we know that the sugar boycott and her relationship to it was satirized in the 1790s. Wedgwood's medallion traveled from England to the United States. We know that Benjamin Franklin was given a set. The medallion was produced to raise money for the Anti-Slavery Society, and that figure of the kneeling Black man on one knee, who's not only begging for freedom, but almost pledging his fealty, circulates widely. It gets gendered, and so there's a female version of it, and you saw that on a couple of objects that I showed you earlier. But when it travels to the United States, the notion shifts, and how those objects are used shifts with it. So you have a tete-a-tete set that's produced later in the 19th century. And what had started off as a project and an enterprise to highlight and raise empathy about the plight of the enslaved now becomes a racist joke. And so the teapot, the finial on the top of the teapot, is in the head, fashioned in the head of a Chinese figure, because of course, tea comes from China. And then the finial with the sugar bowl has on it the head of a Black man, because of course, sugar comes because of his labor. This trivet representing Harriet Beecher Stowe and all the figures around her as if she's the Virgin Mary and they are her disciples is interesting to me for a couple of reasons. I see it as the completion of centering white women's participation in anti-slavery culture. They had always been there. It had always, I argue, been about their own political needs, their own sense of establishing a particular kind of political empire that deployed sensibility and the language of women's rights. There's a chapter in the book where I have a lot to say about Mary Wollstonecraft, and this sort of embodies what it was about the whole time. I'm not suggesting that Cruikshank made this trivet with those politics in mind. I am saying that by the time we see the abolitionist movement and women's participation in it move to the United States in the later part of the 19th century, it's doing a different kind of work, and that work is almost always in the service of promoting women's politics. I'll stop here to see if we have questions. Thank you so much for being attentive.
Thank you so much. We're ready to move to Q&A. Just a reminder to everyone, you can continue to drop your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you'll see that black panel pop up at the bottom, and click Q&A, and you can drop your questions in there. So we're going to start off with a question of, did this style of pottery exist anywhere else in the world, or these representations that you're seeing, or is it something that's limited to ceramics produced in England?
So eventually it spreads to France, and jasperware in particular is popular in France. Creamware is Wedgwood's contribution. Oh, hi everyone. Creamware is Wedgwood's contribution to ceramics and porcelain. So that clay and then using the transferware is unique to England and to Wedgwood and Staffordshire. This is duplicated almost immediately. So I think that there are Delft bowls that would have been, that might have been produced in Holland. But yes, definitely in the United States and also in France.
I have a question here for you. How many people would have bought these teapots? Would they have represented mixed classes? You mentioned that even now they're a little expensive. So I'd love to know what the economics are of actually purchasing these.
Yes. So creamware, it was actually, yes, it was used by everyone. It was in ale houses and public houses. Working middle class people would have been able to afford it. And one of the reasons why it's so politically useful is because it is accessible outside of the aristocratic and upper class homes. So the images and the wares would have circulated really broadly. So everyone would have been able to use it.
And there's, you've touched on this, but can you clarify a little bit more what the difference between porcelain and creamware is, and also creamware and jasperware? I maybe just a little bit more about how they're actually constructed.
Yes, this is a tricky question because I'm not a potter and I've been watching videos for the last 3 months. So partly it is with the clay that's used, right? And so that porcelain is ground differently and actually uses bones, right? The bone china is actually very literal, and people tended, when it's decorated, it tends to be painted. Creamware uses transfer printing where an image is etched, and it could have been on anything. They could have taken paintings, satirical cartoons, pamphlets, and put those images on creamware in a process that was faster, and creamware tended to be sturdier. Jasperware is a much longer, more delicate process. So the clay is dyed with metallic stones, and it's soaked all the way through. So the color goes all the way through, and it goes through the first stage. It's called biscuit. It's a flat mat. And so the first stage is dyeing, as making sure that it's the color and that uses it's blue, green, and then the basalt, which requires a particular kind of soaking so that the black goes all the way through. And then there's a stage where figures are constructed out of clay, modeling clay, and then attached to the object, and then glazed, and then filled in with paint, and then set before it's sold. So those are the 3 different versions. And jasperware, and the reason I think that it's particularly interesting, I appreciate this question, is because it comes from antiquity. Wedgwood is very interested in sort of neoclassical ideas. So the objects on them are nymphs and gods, and I think of Keats's Grecian urn. It's also sort of replicating a really particular aesthetic in a time that predates the slave trade, abolition, and I think it still actually works that way. Whereas the creamware feels like a more current process and a more current object because it's designed to be produced, used. It's not necessarily that it has to be preserved. And it lends itself to political messages because of its production.
So we have a question about religion and Christianity, and the commenter notes that many abolitionists and women customers were Christian at this point, and whether or not displaying these pieces might affirm their moral or religious duty to help his prayer be answered.
To help who?
The prayer be answered of the figures on these pieces.
Oh, yeah. I think more than Christian, there's a Quaker element, right? So part of the anti-sugar movement is also about temperance. And so, yes, maybe to answer the enslaved figure's prayer, but also as a reminder of who is producing and the cost, the physical and moral cost of producing what was being consumed. And so it starts off as the medallion begins, and the image on the medallion begins as a sign of hope that the enslaved might be freed. But I think the moment that it moves to these anti-sugar objects, it's more about reminding people how that is being consumed than ameliorating the actual. I think it becomes fashionable, to put it another way. It becomes the thing that you want to promote. It's unfashionable. One part of the chapter I talk about, you can imagine being in a home where there would have been elaborate paintings of wealthy families who might have had a Black figure as a sign of their wealth, almost as an object to show that they are, as an object, and I mean that, to show their wealth. And then in another home, you wouldn't have that painting. What you would have was a tea set with anti-slavery verse on it to show someone's moral uprightness. And the teapots can say that without anybody saying a word, right? They're inscribed with verses, and they're inscribed with these figures that remind readers, remind users all the time what's happening on distant shores.
That's great. Thank you, Tricia. We have a question about the sugar boycott. The question is pretty simple. Can you say how long it lasted? But just give us a little bit more information about it, if you would.
So there's two versions, I say two chapters of it. So 1792 to about 1806. And then it's picked up again in the mid 1820s. And it's even less successful, right? I think that 25,000 number that Edgeworth cites is actually true. I think that's pretty accurate. But what happens, and more than what it affects, is it becomes a literary trope to remind people about their obligation. And this is what I'm talking about with the children's poems. Amelia Opie has The Black Man's Lament, or How to Make Sugar, which is a poem written for children that tells them that the sweets that they eat, the candy that they enjoy, is made of sugar, and that it's really constructed to talk about Black families in the West Indies. And it describes with some detail how sugar is made. The verse is very simple and tedious to read. It's a very long poem. It's illustrated, depicting Black figures in sugar fields. You never actually see the violence, but you see them producing the work. So they're in the fields, and then they're carrying the sugar to the boiling room. Then it's put in casks, and you see them carrying the sugar in casks. And so it just takes it all the way through. Meanwhile, the verse underneath tells a pretty macabre story about what's taking place. There's a poem called Cuffy the Negro. Part of the it's a poem called Cuffy the Negro, and it's written in a patois, and the speaker in the poem is describing the way sugar is made, but also pushing back against this notion. So the sugar boycotts use the term blood sugar, right, to evoke the horror of what produces it. And that makes all sugar producers and all people participating in that trade very anxious. So in the middle of this poem, he says, there's no blood, there are no body parts. He's sort of promoting the idea that the sugar is pure. So powerful had been the idea of blood sugar. Coleridge writes about blood sugar in his lecture on the slave trade in about 1792.
Like blood diamonds, people say.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anne, you're next. Or am I next? I'm next. Okay. So the question, I had a couple of really interesting questions here. One is that, could you speak a bit more about how white women define themselves by contrasting themselves with the construction of Blackness in these images? And then another listener also wants to hear more about the early women's movements you described about an empire of sensibility, and those both kind of emissaries of sensibility. Maybe you could comment on both of those.
Yeah. So I didn't include it today because I figured people would want to know about the fiction. So I didn't include it in my comments. So partly, I'll take Amelia Opie's novel, Adeline Mowbray. which is a roman à clef about Mary Wollstonecraft's relationship with Godwin. And part of that novel tells the story of our heroine, who is a Wollstonecraft type figure, and that she chooses to live with the man she's in love with outside of the bounds of marriage. On the way to the market to help her to buy a pineapple for her lover, who's feeling very ill, she comes across a mixed race family that is about to be jailed and separated because they owe a debt. And there is a debate that she has with herself and with the person who owes the debt. She can either pay the debt, or she can't afford a pineapple, but she can buy grapes. So, someone's asking the name of the novel. The novel is called Adeline Mowbray, or The Mother and Daughter. And in this, the boy who Adeline meets is described as tawny, Tawny. He's a tawny boy. And she decides after a while that she should free the family. And the mother willingly enslaves herself. She pledges herself to Adeline. She says, to thank you, I will give myself to you. She moves in with Adeline and takes care of her. And her relationship with her own family is dissolved so that she can care for Adeline. The idea of this is that this white figure, by saving this Black woman, earns her fealty. And at the end of the novel, as she's dying, she asks, if I remember this properly, she asks Savannah to take care of her child, and thus replicating this work where Savannah will care for this young white child. She doesn't have to be enslaved. She's been treated kindly, and so she willingly pledges herself and binds herself to the family. This story and how Black women fit into narratives about whiteness sort of run through abolitionist era fiction. In The Woman of Color, A Tale, she's also a mixed race heroine. She's described as very dark. When she wants to make fun of and criticize the other women in the novel, she talks that they are darker than she is. And so the idea of darkness is used as a way to describe someone's attractiveness or their lack of attractiveness. And there's a shift, I should note, in the way that people think about Blackness at the end of the 1800s in general as a racial marker that denotes inferiority and is a marker of enslavement that's different than in previous centuries. So that's one, I think that answers one question. And I think this empire of female sensibility has a lot to do with two things. One, and Wollstonecraft does this, but she's not the only one who does it. And she's not the first one who does it. Comparing women's lot to the lot of enslaved people. Women don't have, and I think, Danielle, you talked about this a little bit, right? White women don't have the freedom to marry. They can't own property. They are chattel passed from father to son. They compared that to chattel slavery, to actual chattel slavery. And so the language that they use is part of that. The other part of it is in controlling appetites. And again, I'll go back to Wollstonecraft, who says at one point that, as she compares the appetite, not just to sugar, but to the blood sugar of having desires that need to be contained and need to be controlled. And in doing so, she points to Black figures as being uncontrollable. She argues that if they are given freedom or resources or anything, that they're vain, that they're going to spend everything on baubles and worry about adornment instead of moral and reason. So those are two plugs of it. And I think the other thing when I talk about this empire of sensibility, of female sensibility, is what happens in anti-slavery movements and organizations, and the way that the abolitionist movement gave women writers the cover to write while not foregoing the idea that proper ladies don't write. So one of the publications I write about in the book is called The Bow in the Clouds, and it's a collection of poems edited by Mary Rawson. And she she participates as an editor, and a lot of the poems are about motherhood. And so there's a way that she gets to forward her writing career by picking the exact right thing to write about. If you're going to, poetry writing, of course, was not considered appropriate for women in the early 19th century. Felicia Hemans, for example, is Felicia He-Man when she becomes a threat to Byron. But if you're writing poetry about enslaved women, or if you're writing poetry about abolition, then the genre is less important than the message.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question about whether or not there's any evidence about how these kinds of objects affected public opinion or contributed to shifts in public policy, or would you argue that it was only self-serving for the creators and consumers?
I think that, it changed. I don't think it changed policy explicitly. The sugar boycotts work to this degree. Sydney Mintz writes about this in Sweetness and Power, how participants, how sugar producers and sugar sellers make fun of blood sugar boycotts in England. And they make fun of how the English are fine eating sugar as long as it doesn't come from the West Indies. They will eat sugar from Cuba. They will eat sugar from Brazil. They'll eat sugar from the East Indies. And they make fun of them for that. And so it changes the conversation without actually changing the policy or law. And it doesn't change consumption, right? Because some of the people who were opposed to sugar were not opposed to sugar because it's a product of the slave trade. They're opposed to sugar because they don't think we should be eating sugar. Right. And there are debates about that. I can't remember which physician comes out and argues that a pound of sugar is better for you than a pound of carrots. Right. There's a sugar industry. There's a sugar lobby that's trying to protect its good, its commodity. There's East Indian and West Indian sugar producers are arguing because of tariffs, and which sugar had a higher tariff, and which sugar producers lost out because they had to pay higher taxes. And so all of these other conversations happen, but I don't think that they necessarily affect policy. And one of the reasons I think that is because the slave trade is abolished in 1807, but of course it's a bill, it's a law, it doesn't necessarily change practice. And it comes up again in the 1820s, which suggests that it hadn't been particularly useful or productive in the 1790s.
I have two questions for you, Tricia, that are unrelated. One is really short. So would Austen's family have used or owned Wedgwood? Mm-hmm. And the bigger question is, I'll just read it. What was the pushback for white women who used the teapots? I'm thinking about the Black Lives Matter t-shirts that women might wear in these times in the US. So a small one and a big one.
I'm just chuckling at the idea of an Austen Black Lives Matter. I mean, right? Because it's a wonderful analogy to make, right? I keep thinking more of the ubiquity of the cancer pin, right? The cancer ribbon. Does that work? So I'm sorry, the first question, I got tickled. And the first question was, was there pushback if you used it? Yes. And I think that passage where people were saying, you can't go anywhere without this being an issue. I think the fact that it keeps being produced, I think the fact that I traveled to 6-7 cities and they were collecting these objects from their surroundings. In other words, these were not traveling exhibits, that the fact that they were there suggests that they were used broadly. The fact that they were sold and suggests that there was a moral calculus to not participating or using that sugar. I don't know, I haven't seen evidence if people were excluded from social gatherings, that we can't tell. And yes, Austen would have seen Wedgwood objects in Bristol.
Yeah, I think that she went to the Wedgwood store on Regent Street. Is that right? I seem to remember.
I think so. Yeah.
And I think, and then someone else here pointed out that the Austen family did have a set of Wedgwood with their coat of arms.
Right. That part I had forgotten.
So Devaney Lucer had an interesting question again, also tying back to Jane Austen. She asked, how might you respond to today's readers who say that they seek out Austen's fiction to avoid talking about politics? And could you say more about how your work might point us to read Austen differently? And the third point, what should we be reading alongside Austen's fiction?
I would push back. It's not that people don't want to talk about politics in Austen. They don't want to talk about race in Austen. People talk about politics all the time. They love her because they say she has strong women, and that's a political assessment, right? They will say that the women aren't just participating in marriage. Everybody wants to be Lizzie Bennet because they think that she's, strong, and nobody wants to be poor Fanny Price because she's so unappealing. So I don't think an apolitical Austen exists. And I think the problem is there are two things I think about that. On the one hand, people, and I say people, a lot of Americans are always saying, why are we always focusing on race and slavery? It was in the past. And then when we get to the past where it was there, they look, we don't want to talk about it here either. It's almost as if the point is not to talk about it. And so I'm not so patient with that resistance. I don't think that, and here's where I understand the company I'm in, and people should push back. I'm not even entirely convinced that Austen would want us to pretend that there were no Black figures, that she lived in a world that was free, right? And I don't even think we don't even necessarily have to think about Mansfield Park, even though we can. I think she's always engaged in some way with what's happening in the larger world, that we keep wanting to read against that grain. I think when we read Persuasion and we understand the wealth that produces Wentworth, right? Those are the Napoleonic Wars, right? I mean, so I think that we only want to embrace a certain kind of history. As to how, and maybe this isn't to go back to why I put that image up of that glorious horse made of porcelain. I think that the point is not to eject Austen or our love of Regency culture from the way we think about the 19th century. I think the goal and the project and the smart way to read is to understand that it's part of a larger universe and that we only pay attention to a slice of it. If you read Maria Edgeworth, Susan Ferrier, Amelia Opie, Hannah More, all of these other women are writing about abolition and the slave trade. And I think that's the answer to that one question, is to understand Austen in a larger context. She's been canonized, and I argue that she's been canonized because at first and second glance, she seems to have separated herself from politics that might make us a little bit queasy. And so I think the way to read is to read her contemporaries. And I would not say that Maria Edgeworth is as good a writer as Austen. Truthfully, I can't make that claim. Belinda is a wonderful novel, but it's more than a little didactic. I think novels like The Woman of Color, A Tale, and I think that we should promote projects that bring more narratives forward that feature and center people of color. Olivia Fairfield in that 1808 novel is not alone. There are a lot of other short stories and novels. I think if, as scholars, we push back against periodization and maybe think about, instead of thinking about that, I'm both a romancist and someone who specializes in Regency era literature and the history of the novel. I do all of those things, and we draw these really sharp lines, but maybe we can let some of those go a little bit. I think a way in is to understand, when I wrote my review of Shonda Rhimes' Bridgerton, I think that that 18th century is really interesting to explore. I don't think she gets everything right in representation, but I do think that if we pay different attention to Queen Charlotte, for example, then already the Regency period is different. And I guess finally, the thing I would say is that we should look at the objects. We should look at the objects and look at the paintings and understand that these were in circulation. The Georgian House Museum in Bristol is one of the places that I write about in the book. And the Georgian House Museum was built on the proceeds of sugar plantations in St. Kitts. And I think knowing that history and understanding, and it's also the place, if they claim, I don't know if I haven't confirmed this, but Wordsworth and Coleridge met there. So there's no space that we already look to that's sort of exempt from this understanding. And one more thing, I also think we have to wonder why we are in these spaces. Then this is where we have different kinds of readers. Not as scholars, I think sometimes there can be a hagiography around writers, especially women writers, because they were so brave. And we don't want to let go of that. We want them to be preserved in a very particular way. I think if we understand the 18th century and the 19th century more fully, then what's happening today won't feel so out of step. It's part of a long process. And we can also see progress, right? I mean, I'm not writing about it in the book, but I do think it's noticeable that the Wedgwood medallion and Colin Kaepernick are in exactly the same stance, right? This is not, it didn't go away. So that's what I would say. And hello, Devaney. I'm always happy when you're in the room with me, even virtually.
Wow, that was very thought-provoking. Thank you.
We actually had some people early on in the chat bring up that comparison between Copernic and that particular object. So you mentioned woman of color several times, and we actually have a question about that, about what you think about the authorship of the woman of color. Is it possible to make a statement on whether the author was mixed race, white, or anything?
Lyndon's coming, isn't he?
He is. We're having
a talk. Lyndon's going to be here. So my students and I have this exercise where we evaluate and assess the end of the novel and imagine what it means if the author is a white man, what it means if the author is a woman of color, and what it means if the author is a white woman. And we read that understanding that Olivia is very neatly excised from that English culture, right? She's imported in, secrets are revealed, wealth is reestablished, her cousin gets to follow the codicil of the will, but still be with the woman he loves, and she goes away. She doesn't reproduce, right? They sleep. I think it's just hilarious that he sleeps one time. He and Angelina have one night together and she's pregnant, and he and Olivia have many nights together and she never gets pregnant. In other words, that world exists as if almost she wasn't there. And depending on, so I'm less interested in who the author might be than I am in how we might read it and how we might read the novel if we imagine the author with different identities, which I think is actually an interesting intellectual exercise anyway. I think sometimes we get so author bound in our analysis that whenever I can take the author out and then let my students work with the text, I think it's really productive.
Thank you. That's a great way of teaching that text, actually.
Yeah.
We have a question about Wedgwood and other manufacturers creating similar products. There's a reference here to pre-American Revolution, or I think maybe pre-Civil War. They mean depicting enslaved Americans, but also did Wedgwood engage in representing or participating in other kind of political commentary causes?
Well, I know that his daughter is responsible for the female version of the medallion featuring the woman, am I not a sister? I'm not a woman and a sister. And apparently, when I talked to one of the historians at the museum, there was one that was promoting Irish suffrage, right? So yes, we know that. Wedgwood's which I'm fuzzy on because I'm starting to think about the politics that he means and the politics that we see in him, the factory town, for example, and the way that, his relationship to progress was really about promoting his business. And so making sure that there was a safe way to get his goods from Staffordshire to Liverpool. And so that's progress, and it's great. And that we have, I think there's a railway system or canals that are used. I'm not sure if it's canals, but the way they were developing a safe way to move these fragile goods. The use of enslaved figures in pre-revolutionary, I don't know. I know that Wedgwood's ideas and his images are widely adopted. And so I would even say that I worry sometimes that some of the creamware that's attributed to Wedgwood in certain galleries and museums the dates predate his development of creamware. And so that's a tricky question to ask a curator. So we attribute a lot to Wedgwood that was actually might have been other people. I know that when you want to buy Jasperware, you're particularly 18th century Jasperware, you're encouraged to look for certain markings. It was in his best interest to be seen ubiquitous, right? You don't call yourself the Queen's artist unless you're trying to build a brand. So I think that other manufacturers would have copied it. I think it was popular and it made money. We just don't always know when it's Wedgwood and when it's not. And I think these objects did travel. I just don't know. And we don't know how early they are. So the verse that is on the Wedgwood teapot that is in like a 1799 edition, the first time I saw it, I shouldn't say the first time I saw it, the first place it was in much earlier, like 1713, 1714. So, and then the question is, does "and freedom to the slave" mean the same thing then that it does in 1790? So all of these ideas and images are circulating, and I sort of located them in this particular moment, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that there's a prehistory.
Gosh, there's so many excellent questions, and it's such an inspiring talk. So I keep thinking, and some of the questioners as well, about Austen Sanditon, and the fragment with the character Miss Lamb, who's a West Indies heiress and was also described as mulatto. Mm-hmm. And one of the listeners here says that she's been glad often that Austen didn't finish Sanditon because I think she would likely have shared the ugly tropes of anti-Blackness in her depiction of her mulatto West Indian minor character. And of course, the Andrew Davies adaptation takes this in a very interesting way and even features it's a very powerful pineapple scene that a lot of people have been commenting on. So curious if you would have taken Sanditon in the same direction, seen Austen taking it in the same direction, since it is, her only character of color.
First, I have to say, I think Andrew Davies gets it right. I like what he does with Miss Lamb. I think the end of the series is horrible and he should be dragged for that. I know why it happened, I'm sure, but I just can't believe that he I just can't believe he did it. I felt like that was an anti-Austen ending. But I do think that I think he represented the politics of that moment without fetishizing violence. And I think he balanced that by giving us a Miss Lamb, who's a three-dimensional figure. She's not just there in service of the white woman. She has her own love interest, and she's angry. I would love to have seen Austen finish that novel, and I think she could have written the underbelly that novel relies on and written it quite well. I don't know if I hadn't thought about that question before, but I think it's interesting that Miss Lamb doesn't speak for so long. I think that's an artistic choice, and it would have been very interesting to see what she would have had her say if she finally had her speak. So I think about maybe Miss Lamb, and I won't know. I would be curious to hear what you all think about Miss Lamb and Mary Crawford from Mansfield Park, who is such a worldly kind of cynical figure, who knows more than anybody else in the novel and is punished, I think, for knowing. And I wonder if Miss Lamb would have been written in that spirit. So not as Austen heroine in the way that maybe we think of as Fanny Price or Emma or Liz Bennet, but as a woman who has to understand the world differently because of where she comes from.
I mean, and she was clearly commenting on some broader issues of imperialism and especially with all the commercial emphasis. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some more questions about the use of these objects. Would they be for daily use, or would they kind of be the centerpiece at abolitionist meetings, or would they just kind of be a conversation piece to kind of start a conversation about slavery or sugar? What evidence do we have of showing how they were used?
I think they were used when people had company. And I think that because of all of the different forms that they took, I think they would have been used in formal dinners. When I was showing you the sugar bowl and saying that it was on gravy boats and soup bowls, I think they definitely would have been used. I think that also because they were made for children, and so children would have used them, maybe for special occasions. So I don't think that they were just put, at first I thought they were kind of like the Obama plate. I'm sure I'll own someday where it'll just be on the mantle and you never use it. I don't think that. And I think in large part because of what we now know, or what I've learned, I should say, I think everyone's known it, about creamware being something that was used in public houses. I think the idea that it's elegant but utilitarian at once meant that it was for everyday use. And so before the abolitionist movement, Addison Steele writes about how women are buying all of this porcelain, and husbands think that they're giving their wives money to buy a top coat or a hat, and really they're buying porcelain, and that it can be broken and it's not sturdy, for lack of a better word. And the fact that women were buying it suggests, and kept buying it. There's only so much room. There's in Susan Ferrier's novel, Marriage, the heroine is a flighty, unreliable woman who in a moment in the novel is presented with a particularly hideous racist teapot. And the merchant who's selling it to her describes it in great detail. The teapot is of a squatting Asian man the spigot, the spout is his mouth. And then if you pour it, then the tea comes out of his mouth. And it's grotesque and it's offensive, and she loves it. And that is seen as a sign of her immorality, not just that she's spending money gratuitously on an object, but on such a hideous, the fact that it's described in such detail. And she says, it's so grotesque, I must have it. So I don't think you buy that and have it and then put it away. I don't think it's just on display. I think you want to show people how it works, that look how the tea comes out and look how you take his head off. So I do think that those objects were used.
I'll offer us the last question. We have a number of questions, but this one I think is a great way to sum up the spirit of your talk. What do you think about the sincerity of belief of the people who are producing these objects? So was Wedgwood an abolitionist, or was he just a smart businessman?
Yes, I think both of those things are true. In preparing for today, and I'm sorry about the mess up with the slides. There's a slide in there that puts it on automatic, and so it kind of threw me off. But I would point us back to the fact that in the 1770s, he was making bowls, right, that commemorated the ships that were transporting captured African women and men. And that's what, maybe 1786. So by 1792, he has the medallion that he's selling for a profit. There are two really great lectures on Wedgwood that I listened to as part of my research. And this is a man who pretty much invented buy one, get one free. He didn't call it BOGO, but he did, and a lifetime guarantee on his object. So he knew how to build customers. And I'll repeat that he did the showrooms and the pattern books. There's an entire culture that he's at the center of about the act of buying. I think that we only know that there's one medallion. So he just made the one. I kind of think he could have done others and done more with it. So I do think that he was sympathetic to abolition. I also think that even people who were sympathetic to abolition had financial concerns. He, even he was a shareholder in the Sierra Leone company. This is not a figure who is exempt from any of the sort of the capitalist mode. I mean, he wanted to make money and build an empire, and he did. We still have Wedgwood, and it's Wedgwood. It's the tradition. You can go and you can make your own Jasperware or make your own Wedgwood. I mean, it's a whole experience. And yeah, so I think that he's both things, probably more the businessman than the abolitionist, but I'm writing the book. So.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough on behalf of all of us for you being here, and thank our viewers for being present and participating. This was really terrific.
Yes, thank you for all the good questions.
Yes, and we will wrap up with a word from our partners at the Chapel Hill Public Library and some final words from us at the Jane Austen Summer Program.
Thanks, Danielle. I'm Maya James, a staff member at Chapel Hill Public Library. And on behalf of the town of Chapel Hill and the library, thank you so much, Patricia, for a wonderful presentation. We're so pleased to be teaming up with Jane Austen Company for this series. And we're also really excited that in May, we're going to be hosting a Pride and Prejudice themed writing contest in association with the Race in the Regency series. And the prize is going to be admission to this year's virtual Jane Austen Summer Program, which you're going to hear more about in just a moment. We'll also be hosting a couple of workshops in April to help you get started on your entry for the contest, although you do not have to attend a workshop to enter. Details for the workshops and the contest are going to be posted next week, so keep an eye out on chapelhillpubliclibrary.org and our social media pages for that announcement.
I think the contest is going to be about adapting a scene from Pride and Prejudice to something more contemporary and diverse. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. The first scene or chapter from Pride and Prejudice to a different context. And like I said, we're going to have a couple of workshops so that people can get started on that. So I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be really fun.
We'll send out to our email listserv when registration is available. So keep an eye on your inboxes as well. And before you leave, we'd like to announce our next two programs in the Race in the Regency series. On March 25th, Robert Morrison will be discussing some of the historical inspirations behind the characters of the hit series Bridgerton, including what the series got right and wrong. This is the first of two talks that we're having on Bridgerton, so be sure to catch both of them. And then on April 9th, we're going to be having a session on a book we heard a lot about today. Professor Lyndon Dominique will be talking about the novel Woman of Color. Full details and registration can be found on our website, janeaustenandco.org. As always, these programs are free and will take place over Zoom. You're muted, Emily.
Thank you, Anne. Sorry about that. If you want to hear more about Jane Austen and Jane Austen's world, we highly recommend that you join us for the Jane Austen Summer Program this year. It's virtual, so you don't need to travel all the way to Chapel Hill to see us, even though we would love it if you could. The program will take place June 17th through 20th, entirely virtually. We will have lectures, discussion groups, theatricals, and even a murder mystery night. So please check us out at janeaustensummer.org. We would love to see you there.
And while it is completely virtual, we are also sending out a parcel, optional parcel to participants with all sorts of goodies so you can participate in a tactile and interactive way. So thank you to the nearly 300 people who attended today's event. I noticed people from Israel and Canada and Scotland and Australia and Italy. Just wonderful. But if you did enjoy tonight's programming, please consider making a donation to the Jane Austen Summer Program. We're a registered nonprofit, so your donation is tax deductible in the US. Our funding only helps us so far, so we rely on donations like yours to help keep Jane Austen and Company's events free and open to the public. They let us bring in great speakers like Tricia. So thank you once again, everyone. Thank you, Tricia. And I hope you all stay happy and safe until our next event.
Thank you so much. I love the questions. Thanks.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.